We now move on to Dan Page from DiGiCo, who is going to talk to us about live events.
My name's Dan. I'm from DiGiCo, and I'm going to talk about how we approach audio networking in live events. Each of these markets that we talk about today, whether it be broadcast or studio recording, which is going to come a little bit later, or live production events, which is what I'm talking about, they all have very specific requirements. Obviously, it's all about large channel counts of audio and low latency and all of these sort of standard things. But there are some practical problems that we need to overcome, certainly in live production from a DiGiCo point of view. It's not audio over IP networking, as we've heard about this morning. There are elements of that within what I'm going to talk about, but the primary sort of core technologies that we use for our audio networking is slightly different. It's something which we have implemented actually across the last 20 years or more, using the same basic technologies. And it covers some pretty high-profile events. For us, for maybe some of these broadcast manufacturers, these aren't such a big deal, but from a DiGiCo point of view, some of the integration work we've done within some of these live events is pretty important to us and has sort of allowed us to sort of up our game with our newer implementations of this technology. In fact, I'll talk a little bit about the Olympics later, because some of the technology we used was actually pretty basic technology, but imagined maybe in a slightly different way. We've become a prime supplier for the Grammys, again, using our consoles, but the audio networking technology that goes along with that is vital. Traditionally, of course, the rock and roll touring market is what we do, and we're going to demonstrate how we use our technology for that. Another example. But then if we move away from these sort of touring environments, which have their own set of problems that we need to deal with, we come to theatre, which again, is an install, but an install that's quite different to maybe some of these broadcast ones or some of these other installations that we've just heard about. So, from Lion King to Mamma Mia, which, is a worldwide production in many territories, that uses a MADI-based system, as well as some of the other things we're going to use. Billy Elliot, touring productions. And we use these, actually, all of these technologies that I'm going to talk about in a high, in a big list of high-profile tours. All of the ones that show DiGiCo consoles, of course I'm from DiGiCo, so the sales guys push me and say, you need to talk about the consoles as well. All of these ones that list DiGiCo consoles will use probably at least two different forms of audio networking combined to build a bigger system. No single network, from our point of view, is capable of delivering everything we need. It just doesn't work, for a number of reasons, really, which we'll try and have a look at. So, as I say, it's not networking in the IP sense. It's still just a group of systems or interconnecting things which can communicate with each other, which is, a simple definition of a network. And there are, of course, lots of choices. Some of them we do, some of them we don't yet. I'm sure there'll be implementation of some of these within DiGiCo products as time goes on. But from the things that we've talked about this morning, which are IP-based networks, this is one that we haven't talked about yet, which is, if you look in your programs, my good friend Gil here will talk to you about next, which is the SoundGrid network. This was something which we implemented a few years back with the prime purpose of adding real-time. Of course, we've heard today real-time doesn't exist, but real-time processing for our consoles. So that is a network-based protocol, which we pretty much widely implement on every desk. Certainly those that go into America, it is something that the American market has absorbed really well, and it's sort of a standard feature now. But again, it's something new for maybe some of you guys who won't have heard of it. We do Dante. We only do it in 8-channel blocks, and again, this allows us to interface to wider systems. It's a case of delivering audio to amps or, individual devices. It's not part of a wider Dante network because we have other infrastructures which actually, from our point of view, deliver much more than a Dante network could ever do. But we have the option of having a Dante module if that's what you need. No one's really talked about ANET from Avium, but again, it is one of these network protocols that has been kicking about. Within theatre, it's widely used for personal mixers. Lots of applications for it in the house of worship market. Again, the idea that they've become much more technologically aware, and house bands, if you like, want to have a better expression within churches and houses of worship, often use this sort of type technology. So again, that's something that we can implement if that's what the system needs. In the past, we did EtherSound. It's not something which we have developed for the new range of consoles, but again, there are plenty of old D-series consoles kicking about, and there are still EtherSound modules around and about. But all of these things really allow us to interface into a wide range of systems. The console system, and much like you might hear with Hydra 2, it's a core audio system which then needs to talk to other systems within a wider environment. And that's what these technologies are to us. They give us the ability to interface into other things. But they don't really form the core of what we do. I think our primary source of audio has been for a long time. It's still widely used, as we'll see today. Actually, is MADI. Now, I know we have historically thought of this as a point-to-point connection delivering 64 channels at 48K from point A to point B, and that's great, and it still has a wide application in lots of markets here. It's something which we implement on every console, but it's widely adopted by a long list of other manufacturers. You don't have to configure it, you don't have to manage it, you plug it in, it works. It delivers 56 or 64 channels, and that's the only choice you have to make. It delivers a decent channel count, a fixed sample rate, 48K, or double it to 96, you halve the channel count. And it's, this easy, robust signal which allows us to start building a network. And, MADI can start to form a network of devices. We embed our control data in it. We actually reduce the channel count from 64 to 56 and use nominally channel 57 to embed our control data for remote controlling racks and stuff. So, it's easy to manage, and, it's widely used, say, for multi-channel recording in the live environment. RME had it their own way for a long time in terms of MADI interfaces, and if you would go to any live gig really with any MADI-based console, the chances are you're going to see a MADI-based recorder there. Gets replaced a little bit by Pro Tool systems, but it's still this great thing. And actually, more recently, Mark Brunker from Opticore has developed his SANE network stuff, synchronous audio network, and Ethernet, I think it stands for, something like that. Essentially, it's MADI over Cat5, where you use part of your physical infrastructure for delivering MADI, and the rest of the physical infrastructure can be retained for using Ethernet. And that's become essentially part of the AS10 spec. Something which probably, when AS10 came along, back in the day when it was dash machines and things, no one imagined that we would take that route with it. But it has developed, in many respects, into a network-style protocol. It's not network as in the routability and packetized, but it uses the same Cat5 connection. So if we take that principle, MADI's incredibly useful and robust in terms of delivering large-scale audio systems. If we look at something which was done a few years back, if we take our signal input on the left-hand side, this was actually split into a dual system to deliver redundant audio in two different ways. There was a primary octa-core-based system, which I will talk about octa-core in a little bit. But actually, the other split came into a DiGiCo rack, was remote controlled, so there was no console involved, it was just an I/O device that then delivered MADI. And then through a series of devices, MADI bridges from RME, and purple boxes from DiGiCo is essentially a copper to optical interface to allow us to extend the distance. That, MADI has a fixed, not very long length that you can go over in its copper form. Putting it over optics or fibre allows us to send it much, much further, which gave us, for a big event, a complete MADI distribution system that sat alongside something which was considered to be, in many respects, a network device. The optical system is a network of devices that allows you full routability and everything else. We can actually match that using MADI-based systems, either for live inputs and in this case for playback distributed amongst lots of consoles as well. So it's really flexible and really robust, which makes it really great for these sort of high-pressure live environments. In a similar way, this is actually the MADI patch from the Coldplay tour. A pair of RME bridges, so we've got 8 MADI in and out on each device, shows us how we can take blocks of channels, 56 or 64 channels, and split and distribute them between the systems that need to see it. We've built a network out of blocks of 64 channels and RME devices, feeding consoles, feeding recorders, actually feeding broadcast trucks and all sorts of stuff. But actually this is just building blocks of things that we can connect together to do, and it's really, really simple and really easy. And there are alternatives. There are actually MADI routers now that give you virtually cross-point routing within multiple MADI streams, and the ability to build single MADI streams out of lots of different MADI streams, picking and choosing the channels. But actually, in the real world, simplicity is the key, and these RME-style boxes that just do chunks of channels are much more widely implemented. I was designing systems of this, years ago, sort of 6-7 years ago, using MADI bridges, and it's still in use today because it works. Why replace it with something that adds latency, because this doesn't, and packetize something and make it more complicated to deliver the same thing. In the live production environment that I live in terms of my DiGiCo job, it's very hard. It would be very hard to replace something like this with an IP-based system. So it serves a really good purpose. But that's all built on MADI, at least 64 channels of MADI in a copper or fibre cable at a time. The primary audio network that we would implement on a DiGiCo system is based on Optical, so German manufacturer. It's actually MADI-based in terms of the data structure, but it uses optics to give us distance, give us channel count, and all sorts of stuff. But what are the requirements of this sort of system? Everyone's talked about latency today, and I'm going to do it as well. If we take a basic optical system, which is analog in, through the transmission and back out, analog again, these are the quoted latencies. Now, at the A to D and the D to A stage, I don't care what your transmission system is in between, you can't change the laws of physics. It's going to take you time to do those conversions. So actually, really what we're interested in is the bit in the middle. And in this case, the ability to sync and actually shuffle the data a little bit gives us a 2-sample delay across the optical system, which gives us, at 48K at least, about 1.5 milliseconds of latency. If you add to that the processing delays within a console, at 48K, that gives us a 2 millisecond latency. Now, someone today, I can't remember who earlier today, said that the 2 milliseconds is really the limit of what people was acceptable in terms of a latency. We have plenty of examples of artists these days that find 2 milliseconds unacceptable. It's too long. If we double the sample rate and go 96K, the conversion times obviously drop, and it gives us a total latency of 0.7 milliseconds, which means through the console, fully processed, analog in, through the network and out again, we can have a total latency of about 1.1 milliseconds. For monitor applications, and as we start to add other network-based systems to this, maybe for plug-in processing stuff, it's important that our core latency is that low. Because the alternative is that artists are demanding analog signal paths for their ears. So An artist has a microphone, it has it's an analog radio mic as opposed to a digital radio mic, because the digital ones have latency. You then split the signal, half of it going to the desk to be mixed with the other sources, and the other half in an analog path going to an analog summing amp and back to his ears, so that he has the shortest path possible. And this is for an artist that considers 2 milliseconds too long. So, latency is a huge issue, and I think one of the things that I sit and listen today, and people talk about latency. If you're starting within some of these live production environments to add 2, 3, 4 milliseconds of latency to something, some artists and some environments, actually that's not enough. So the optical for us delivers this really amazingly low latency transport system.
Where is the 2 or 3, 4 millisecond latency coming?
Within what? Within.
That's what I'm asking. You're saying to add 2 or 3.
Well, if you were to add some external processing to a digital console, if that were an analog piece of processing, because someone has their favourite piece of outboard kit they must run through, you're then introducing another A to D and a D to A stage. If you have some convoluted summing path within your console, summing takes time. It may be odd samples, but if you're going to introduce some other piece of effect, there is other latency involved. Obviously, we need to support 48 and 96K. 96K has become the norm in terms of channel count, but more importantly, the sample rate is the channel count. And the one thing that actually the optical system allows us to do is to offer the same channel count to either sample rate. Now, you could argue, because we can do 500 channels at 96K, that gives us 1,000 channels at 48K. And yes, you are right. The optical system, if you took it as just an optical system, will deliver 1,000 channels at 48K. But from a production point of view, that's not so desirable. A production goes to rehearsals and they start and they tour and they may be running at 48K and they've filled up their optical system. And then for whatever reason they make a decision that they would like to go up to 96K to take advantage of some sonic improvement or whatever. Are you asking them then to throw away half their channels because you want to double the sample rate? No. What's much better from our point of view in terms of designing production systems is to say you have 500 channels and you can use it at either sample rate. It's much, much more flexible for us because surprisingly people do change sample rates mid-tour for odd gigs. It may be that they're going to do a DVD shoot and they actually choose, we're going to actually downgo to 48K because broadcast systems delivering MADI into this, that and the other, much better at 48K, or I'm going to stop it in this in a minute. It's one of those practical things. It's not actually about channel count so much, it's about the flexibility of giving the user the choice of what they would like to do rather than imposing some artificial limit based on, technology, I suppose. Flexibility and usability. Now, these are systems that get loaded in and out of venues every day. Literally, they'll do a gig, they'll load in at lunchtime, they'll plug it all together, they'll do the gig, and then they take it apart, put it in a truck, drive hundreds of miles, and repeat it day in, day out. And it has to be a reliable system that can stand up to that. So obviously, the connection part is one thing, but the fault tolerance. Optical is a redundant system based on a loop, so you can break the loop and the audio continues to work. If you have a situation where a rack fails, or a module fails, what do? Well, you can take it out of the loop and temporarily you've lost that module, but the audio continues to flow. So you bring a new rack in. How do you get that rack to work again? Well, within a live environment, what you don't want to have to do is then reteach it by plugging it up to a computer and giving it IP addresses and routing stuff to it. You don't want to have to go through all of that just to get this replacement box back in the system and working again. So we have a system where you can unplug it, you plug your new rack in, you press one button on any console, that rack is given its identity and it passes audio within a second. It's a really easy, flexible system because in the touring market, you don't have the option of sending a network engineer. Actually, they don't even send a console engineer half the time. The guy mixing front of house and monitors has to do it himself. So while you give him this system that is network capable, if you like, and can deliver 500 channels at 96K, he just pushes faders for a living, but he's got to look after it. I think someone keeps moving that closer to me because I'm trying to avoid it. So you get the point of why these systems have to be so robust from our point of view, fast to reconfigure and fault tolerant. And actually, you know, it allows us, as we extend on this optical network, to integrate into wider systems, as I hope to sort of demonstrate, really. So the optical system itself is 24 nodes, 10 of which we allocate to processing engines, and 14 of which for racks. We say 5 redundant consoles. Redundancy-wise, we duplicate DSP entirely as a redundant engine, which gives us our processing redundancy as well as our optical infrastructure redundancy. Each loop can carry 500 channels at either sample rate. We could do 2 loops. We have full flexibility of routing within it. Of course, you know, with any network-based system, it isn't just dealing with big blocks of channels from A to B. We have to be able to split them, route them, manage them. I've said about the redundant loop topology. Quick to configure without the need of external computers, and it's a really important point. When we took on optical, I don't know if you know, you plug a laptop into it at any device, and that one device configures the network, sets up the routing. But if you think of it from a production point of view and going into a venue and trying to manage this on a daily basis, it was much better for us to try and implement a system where any console, any controlling device on the loop, could take control of the optic loop in terms of configuring it, routing audio, etc. Actually, what we did, we reinvented or invented a system by which the responsibility for configuring the loop is passed around the loop between consoles, which allows any console in the loop at any point in time to take control. Now, actually, Mark Brunker Optical then implemented that back into his code, which is now where we're going with the integration of both DiGiCo optic loop and Opticore branded devices within the same infrastructure. So we start to see boxes using the same technology from multiple manufacturers coexisting on the same physical layer. And then multi-mode and single-mode operation, it's all about distance, really. Multi-mode gives us 300-400 meters, whatever it is. Single-mode gives us kilometers worth. And we can mix it within a system. It doesn't have to be one, it doesn't have to be the other. It's down to you to decide what you need for your setup. So that's the sort of the theory in the boxes and why we do it. Practically speaking, there's a couple of systems I've got. The first was the Ryder Cup this year, UK rental company, 200 channels of audio at 96K with multiple consoles. So we had, I think it was at least 3 consoles on the system. And again, sharing the racks via this fiber loop. MADI-based record systems, this whole virtual soundcheck thing where you record the soundcheck and then you play it back so the band can go and have their tea, is widely used. And again, you can see we had 128 channels at 96K, MADI-based at front of house. And actually, monitors, while it was 128 channels at 96K recording, that was played back through the SoundGrid network to 2 consoles simultaneously, so 256 at 96K. So we have quite a lot of flexibility using, again here, at least two different network systems, sharing the racks. And the last point, inter-console audio, so routing the audio directly between the consoles to run the shout system and comms. One of the problems with that is it relies on the consoles being on for your shout system to work or for your comms to work. And that's not always desirable. And I'll show you in a minute something that allows us to improve that. But certainly within this environment, it's quite a common way of doing it is to route the shout and the comms between the consoles using the fiber loop as an infrastructure, really. This was a system designed for a UK Act a few years ago. The red loop, which includes 4 SD7s and 4 stage racks, is the primary system for getting audio in and out of the consoles and doing the submixing and monitors from front of house. But the big green section at the top is the MADI distribution system used for recording and virtual sound check. And as you can see, it involves a whole bunch of MADI bridges and purple boxes to extend it over long distance, and it's all a bit of a complicated system, really. We'll have a look at that again in a minute. On the right here, you'll see the SoundGrid network processing part attached to the front house console. That was the addition of the Wave SoundGrid network for plug-in processing, which Gil will tell you about in a minute. So that's actually pretty typical of a touring type system. Multiple networks, there's 3 going on there, if you like, to provide it. And in fact, that gave us 200 inputs, 230 odd buses, so summing buses, virtually 1,000 process channels across the system and 264 recorded tracks. And that was for, one man and his band as a stadium touring system. But that's, again, still using only DiGiCo optical boxes as opposed to the wider sort of optical-only ones. And as I say, it's more than just DiGiCo, and this is where it starts to get more interesting. We now have the ability to integrate the optical branded boxes within our same loop. The hardware is managed from us, so again, there is no sense of having to add another control layer to it. All of the parameters and all of the gain and management of those boxes, again, handled directly from our console software. And you can see the range of boxes we support, DD4s, DD2s, XXRs, mic amps, a whole bunch of different style of boxes, which directly interface onto our optic system, which I say gives us increased flexibility, more choice, better integration. In some respects, we're doing ourselves out of a job because people are going to go and buy optical boxes instead of ours, which isn't so great from a sales point of view. But if we go back to this system that we were looking at a minute ago, and we take all of that MADI, and instead of doing all that complicated MADI distribution using bridges and switches, and replace it with a couple of optical boxes, we've reduced that bit of a nightmare MADI system down to a couple of systems into a box which sits directly into our network, which actually gives us better flexibility and increased functionality and the ability to distribute audio using our loop, using MADI directly on and off it. So, it's a huge change for the sake of adding third-party support of another manufacturer. So it's a really cool thing. And then it's not really just about audio, because if we think about the requirements of a large production system, at least, first there's the distance. So at our point, more than 100 meters becomes a problem because copper structures, at least, become a bit of a problem at that point. So there are some comms to deal with, which may be audio-based, but may well also be video-based. There's the audio system, which we've talked about, stage racks, playback systems, multiple consoles all together in the same system. There is video to deal with because, it's one of those standard things of touring these days. There's a huge video production that goes alongside it. And lighting control, all the DMX and other things they use within those. So that's sort of the environment of a production. It's not just about the audio. But what if we could do something clever and give ourselves a single fiber backbone, a central structure to allow us to combine these things? And that's exactly what Broman gives us. Broman is a division of optical, if you like. Again, Mark Brunker is involved here. And it gives us a fiber-based platform for distributing on a network basis, really, audio, video, and data. It gives us the routing capabilities that we expect from any network. And in fact, to do that and to handle these multiple media streams of different sample rates and data rates, he uses wave division multiplexing. If you take essentially like a analogy beam of light, you use a prism to split it into colours, each of those colours becomes one of our channels in the Broman fibre. And then each of those channels can contain a separate piece of information, and you bring it back together at the other end, and you've got this transmission system down a single fibre cable. It handles down this then, on each of these channels within this Broman system, a whole range of different structures, so data formats. So we've got 3G, HD, SDI video. We've got optical, which I'll come to. We can do intercom, optical work with Clearcom. They do a branded box that does Clearcom on an optical network. So again, we've got another manufacturer hopping on and using the same technology as a backbone between these manufacturers. We can send data, word clock, MADI, whatever. The optical bit's interesting because we allocate a full channel within Broman to optical, which gives us our full 500 channels at 96K down this Broman backbone alongside data and video and comms and other things. So from a installation point of view, whether it be going into a stadium and pulling a piece of fibre from front of house to stage, you're pulling one piece of fibre instead of 5 bits of fibre, or within an install in a building, you're installing one fibre loop that now has the ability to interface to a wide range of systems. It's actually much more useful. And that optical system is entirely transparent to the console. As far as the console is concerned, that Broman part doesn't exist. It's just an optical network. So all of the data control and management we do within our console software continues to work, even though we've hopped onto this other network system to allow us to move the audio. You couldn't really get two more extreme different gigs. I mean, we've got Top Gear, so Clarkson and the boys, and Hillsong Worship Conference. I mean, the two extremes of live events that might go on, but actually both of these used this Broman technology like this. So we start the world with our Broman loop, Mux 22 box at each end, and a redundant fibre link between them. And then each end we can add our existing systems that we would normally run. So multiple consoles and multiple racks on this blue optical. As far as optical is concerned, it's just a loop. We've used this redundant fibre Broman system to achieve it. They did all their amp control, so DMB, which is just basically a data connection from front house to monitors to do that. That would have been a different network they would have had to run originally. Video World, the God TV feed at Hillsong or whatever it might be, that existed there. So, as I say, between the systems at each end, it's like the Broman wasn't there. It's this transparent delivery system, low latency delivery system that allows us to interface a wide range of systems across a much wider environment. So I hope I've sort of told you what we do from the DiGiCo point of view. As I say, I don't think for many environments there is a single network that is capable of delivering everything everybody needs. You take these as a bunch of tools and you pick and choose the ones you use to build the system to do the job. You know, I don't believe there yet is one system that does it. So the designers, as I say, have to pick whichever one is most suitable. And we will continue to, utilise different network formats. Ultimately, it's driven by what engineers want and the production demands of the event. So thanks for listening. That's it from me.
Thank you, Dan.